Welcome back to Sidewalk Skyline Podcast, where we explore faith at work in Canadian cities. This is our fourth episode looking at gangland preachers. While gang activity is prevalent in various parts of Canada, there are also men and women in those neighborhoods that are making a difference one-on-one. Today I'm talking with Ejay Tupe, an urban missionary in downtown Toronto. I've had many conversations with my friend Ejay and heard about his pimp exit strategies, his interaction with gang-affiliated youth, and the pastoral care he provides to people in crisis at all times. In his book, Generous Justice, Tim Keller wrote these words: "If a person has grasped the meaning of God's grace in his heart, he will do justice. If he doesn't live justly, then he may say with his lips that he is grateful for God's grace, but in his heart he is far from him. If he doesn't care about the poor, it reveals that at best he doesn't understand the grace he has experienced, and at worst has not really encountered the saving mercy of God. Grace should make you just." Well, the grace of God has certainly made Ejay Tupe into a man of merciful justice. Here's an interview I recorded earlier this year at the Mission Canada office in Mississauga. Ejay, you've told me about how a high school teacher had a profound influence on your journey to faith. What's the story there?
It's actually funny because she goes around speaking now and tells people about it.
Oh, so that's good.
Yeah. No, so it's not. It's so. I guess when I was a new immigrant to Canada
From
the Philippines, just like many other immigrant kids, especially the ones who have a hard time fitting in, I got myself into a lot of trouble and had a crisis of faith. I probably walked out from whatever faith I had in my childhood. And actually, not probably, I did. And one day, and part of that was obviously, if you got a lot of stuff going on in your mind, your heart, doing homework is not important to you. Mm-hmm. So my English teacher was particularly concerned because I guess to her, she can perceive that I was a bright student, and she was confused because what she saw didn't match what I would hand in. So I guess one day she said, could I speak to you after class? And so I said, sure, no problem. And then she said, whatever. I don't probably remember because I was not interested in what
How old were you?
Oh man, I think it was 14.
Mm-hmm.
Something 14. I was 14 turning 15 because I just started grade 10, I think.
Yeah. And
then I guess out of nowhere, this conversation started going to talk about faith. And, well, that got me uncomfortable. Well, that's not what I signed up for, but okay. And then I don't know where she started talking to me about her church and asked if I'd been there. And I played piano for some weddings at back then Queensway Cathedral, and that was her church. Mm-hmm. And then she asked, hey, would you like to come? And I said, well, I live far. We were living in Mississauga at that time, and that church is in Etobicoke. And so that was that. But then she said this outrageous thing. It's like, well, I'll pick you up.
That's a little bit of a hike.
Yeah, even back then, you're not supposed to pick up your high school students staying in the church.
No.
Yeah. So she did. She had a friend come along with her for just accountability, I guess, which is fine. And I remember Stuart Mulligan was preaching that day. I don't particularly remember what he said, but I do particularly remember that I liked the man. Reminded me of elders from the Philippines. Mm. And then, what she did was a professional risk But in the realm of the spirit, it wasn't a risk. It was the
Mhm.
right thing. It's what I needed at that time. She didn't know that she would be a catalyst for me to come to the Lord in a whole new way, in a passionate way that's still to this day. And yeah, even now I've run into her a number of times, and she said she's never done it since.
Yeah.
She never did it before, and she never did it again.
Do you think that to be led of the Spirit will inevitably lead to some measure of risk?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you read the specific words used by the Bible where the Spirit dynamos, dynamite,
Mm-hmm.
dynamic.
Dynamite is risky.
Yeah. I mean,
But effective.
But you know, it's funny. I was actually just starting to write about it this week. I about safety. That the safest place we could be is in the middle of God's will.
Mm.
But what seemed risky to the world is safe in God's will.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's always a conflict between the way the world works and the way God works, and I lament the fact that I don't see a lot of godly riskiness in a generation these days. That's not saying that things are bad, but
Yeah.
I'd like to think that being Pentecostal, that was our jam.
Yeah. Well, you're certainly not risk averse.
No.
So this risk-taking high school teacher takes you to church, and that was the beginning of you really landing in your faith, wasn't it?
Yeah. I then met my youth pastor. He tried to bribe me with a ride also.
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, she pulled that off already. So
Yeah.
so he bribed me with food.
Oh, yeah.
So I said, I'll buy you a sandwich. Like, okay, a ride and a sandwich. So oddly enough, those two themes in my ministry life still continued on. Food
Yeah.
and rides.
Go anywhere they'll take you, and
Yeah.
if there's food, you're in.
Well, that's what that's probably my best method for leading people to Christ these days. Hey, you want a ride?
Yeah.
You want some food?
I hear you.
Still works.
Yeah. So now you're a teen. You're walking with Jesus. You're in a youth group. When did you get the feeling that you were supposed to go to Bible college and this whole possibility of entering into some kind of ministry? How'd that happen to you?
Well, I feel like I was the last one to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Other people saw it before you did?
By the time I told them this is they were looking like, yeah, you just figured that out now.
Yeah.
You know, I just like any 17 or 18-year-old, I was in that space of like, okay, what do I do after high school? I had opportunities to do other things. I could have pursued music. I could have pursued computer programming. My gosh, I'd be so much richer these days.
Yeah.
If I did that.
Yeah.
But I was in a service at Brayside, and I said a very dangerous prayer. I said to God, tell me what you want, Lord. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. I'll go wherever you need me to go. I'll do whatever you want me to do. I'll say whatever you want me to say.
Yeah.
And then I heard a whisper in my heart saying, I'm calling you.
Mm-hmm.
I lost my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I think I remember particularly for some reason Mark Griffin was there,
Mm-hmm.
old POC guy. Noticed that I was having like an experience, and we had a chat, and I told my youth pastor Dwayne Henry, and he was not surprised again, and then eventually once I applied for school, I needed to get references, so my pastor then was David Hazard. He was not surprised. Talked to my mentors at the church, the elders. They were not surprised. My own mother was not surprised.
Yeah.
It seems like I was the only one that was surprised. So that's how that went. But, the way calling works, right? It's never clear as day. The only thing
Right.
clear is you say yes. Because
Yeah.
Lord knows what I'm doing now.
Well, Braeside Pentecostal Camp is a dangerous place.
Yeah.
If you want to keep your life to yourself and you want to avoid God's voice,
Don't go
to
there.
Braeside.
Don't go
There we go.
I'm sure I'm not the only
Yeah.
one who has had that experience.
So as you began as a young man in your teens to respond to that call, that decision to maybe go to Bible college and start to dream about the future, what was in your head at that time, and where to go?
Well, it's probably more carnal, really. It's funny how the flesh and ambition gets muddled with God's idea, right? So I probably had a very linear idea about ministry. So I was going to be in youth ministry, then after doing that and kicking butt, be an associate pastor, and then do that, kick butt, be senior pastor. I mean, that was my dream back then. I'm sure when I told God, he was laughing.
Yeah.
Oh boy, are you up for a surprise?
Oh, you think I called you to that?
Yeah. So I started at Masters. I was there my first 2 years, and the transition.
Were you at Masters College when it was in Peterborough or when it was in Toronto?
Peterborough. So I was in Peterborough. My second year was when the transition was happening. That was tough for me. I was quite close with my teachers, and the transition was toughest on them. And I just sensed in my heart, just hearing from the Lord is a tricky thing, God was just trying to tell me that my job was to focus on learning about Him and not get caught up with whatever politics was going on.
Yeah.
It definitely was a political time at the school, in our fellowship, in our all over the place. So when the school moved to Toronto, oddly enough, I left, even though that was technically coming to my hometown. I just felt a sense that I needed to obey, and I actually even went to the school where most students didn't go. Most went to BC, went to Summit. I went to Vanguard, where it gets to -60. I had to. I lived with Dr. Ron Powell.
Oh, Ron, yeah.
Yeah, for 6 weeks I was homeless in his basement. And I didn't fully understand why. Edmonton was a hard season for me. I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any friends. Because I was new, and then my family, both my parents got laid off. So my third year, I was full-time at school, full-time in my internship. I worked full-time as a night manager in a hotel. I had my intern. And then I was on student council, because I became friends with the president of student council, and the treasurer needed help, so she asked me to be the new treasurer of the student council, and then I was helping out a church plant, black church plant.
Wow.
And so I was busy.
Yeah.
I was busy, but it was cold and it was lonely for me, and I didn't understand.
It's probably good that you were busy because you were so lonely.
Yeah. And I made friends, but it wasn't.
It wasn't home.
It wasn't home.
No.
And Edmonton's a good city, but it's more like a big town.
Yeah.
At least back then. Now it's very different.
Yeah.
But that's where God's next season of call for me.
Yeah. So now you've graduated from Vanguard. You're ready to enter into the limelight of professional ministry.
Yeah. Such a bright light.
Yeah. And somehow you end up getting sidetracked to the streets.
Yeah. What seemed like a sidetrack was actually not a sidetrack at all. That's probably the plan all along.
Yeah, it was it was the path.
Yeah. When I graduated, I thought now I'd follow this plan of mine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, youth pastor, associate, whatever. And I remember I went through 5 interviews after I graduated. It just nothing worked out. Either I didn't want to be there, or I went there and things were off. And next thing you know, it's the middle of the summer. No one's hiring anymore because, you know, you need to have a youth pastor in way before fall.
Mm-hmm.
And I was an assistant youth pastor with Mark Barrett at Southside. And my last interview was in San Jose. I flew there 5 days, came back, and I was like, I'm not meant to be there. And I remember having bitterness in my heart. That was a tough conversation amongst friends. Because I told them, like, I feel like God fooled me. You know,
Yeah.
I poured my heart into...
What have these last 4 years been about?
Yeah, right? Studied hard, did all the stuff,
Yeah.
and then I needed to make ends meet. So I worked in a lumber yard. My friend got me a job in a lumber yard. My shift was 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning. It was horrible. Like, you can't hang out.
What was the name of that coworker you told me about?
Yeah. Ended up, and the way this lumber yard worked, I only worked with one guy, so I couldn't even make friends. So my job was to put wood on the table, and my coworker Igor would cut it. Igor. And I thought maybe the silver lining is I lead Igor to Christ. Igor didn't speak English. And I remember I'd make mistakes and he would just like grunt and point. And I know I'm Pentecostal, but I don't know if I can speak in tongues in Polish. But good guy. And I remember being angry sometimes. I mean, you put wood on the table for 12 hours. By the hour 10, that gets a little mind-numbing.
Yeah.
And,
I'm picking up a theme here that before God could really bring you to where he wanted, you had to learn about your own loneliness.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things I had to wrestle with is being called being a prophet.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I've always been leery of people who parade that title. I'm prophet this, prophetess this.
Yeah.
Because when you read through the Old Testament, none of those
they weren't nice. They weren't liked.
Yeah, none of them wanted to be a prophet.
Right.
I just did an inductive study in the book of Amos. He was a shepherd.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not trained prophet. What is this?
Yeah.
And I realized the journey of the prophets was always they had a deep faith with God, not a transactional one where good things happen, therefore we're good, God. Like, no, it wasn't like that. They had a deep faith, and they had a tough call, and they went through hardship to live out their call. And that seems to be the theme of my life back then, and still to this day. Because then I remember at that lumber yard, there was my lunchtime is at 2 a.m. in the morning. Yeah, and I saw an ad in a paper. Men's Shelter was hiring intake workers, and I used to do street ministry with Yvette Duhamel at Spadina in Queen. There's an old name. So I applied. Then my last interview was at the actual shelter, and it was odd. It was a hot spring day in Edmonton, which is rare. So the shelter smelled really bad, especially bad. And I remember the first time I smelled that shelter, I heard from the Lord again, my new call. And Lord said, "This is the smell of people I love. Now go love them."
Wow.
Yeah. Still, and it's funny because now I speak about it as a story. And I remember it was just a conversation between myself and Pastor Mark. So he laughs about it now too, because that was just the conversation between me, him, and his wife Kirsten, and no, we never thought that would ever be anything other than
Yeah.
a conversation amongst ourselves. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Give me a real quick list of all the kind of roles and types of relationships that you have with people on the streets in Toronto. Where like you're doing a lot of things over there. How long you been there now?
I've been
Like going back to when you first landed at working at the shelter. That would be the beginning of.
Oh yeah, that was 06.
06, yeah.
It's
So 14 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're coming into 14 years.
Yeah. And then I landed in Toronto 07.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good chunk of time now.
Yeah.
I don't know, when I was both
So
of
if
the
somebody's listening and they say, I don't know what you do, what do you do?
So on a technical term, some social workers call what I do case management.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you meet case managers, a lot of things that I do are not just case management.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of the stuff that pastors do.
Mm-hmm.
Really care, really be there.
Yeah.
But I just so happen to have the technical knowledge of how to help someone navigate through the system.
Right.
And so that's the thing that pastors won't have. Pastors will have the heart, they'll have the care, they'll have the listening ear, but they won't have the technical know-how of how to,
Yeah.
at least generally. Some do.
Some do, yeah.
But for the most part, it's not something you learn in Bible college.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in a weird way, I guess I'm a pastor who knows how to case manage.
Mm-hmm.
And because case managers will not pray with you.
No.
Or
and may not go the extra mile.
No.
Yeah.
And
or have you into their home.
well, that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
So the boundaries are pretty clear cut in social work.
Mm-hmm.
But in pastor world, if you have too thick of a boundary with the people you serve, are you even their pastor?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so it's that funny fine line. And so so it's quite diverse. So I can't say that I just deal with drug dealers, for instance. I can't say that I just deal with addicts. I can't just say I deal like anyone who is in cyclical poverty. I try to help them. Like right now, I'm dealing with 2 CAS matters. One's an apprehension and one's we're trying to get that child back. And then this afternoon I'm going to be in prison and I'm trying to help 2 guys transition into, they're going to be sentenced and they're going to be shipped into a federal penitentiary, and trying to help them plan for that. And then I got a couple guys getting out and trying to plan for that. Some people, they don't have any criminal histories. They suffer from PTSD, and so I've got a landlord-tenant board matter coming up in a couple months. So it's funny places that I run into. Probably a perfect example is one of my guys. He's a severe alcoholic. I helped him reconnect with his son. I realized that was one of the deepest wounds in his heart. So I helped him reconnect with his son. He didn't see his son for 2 years. And so after that, a few months later, he decided, hey, you know what? I think I need to deal with my alcoholism. It's like, great. So made a phone call to CAMH that day. And they said, great, we'll see you for an intake in 5 months.
5 months.
But that's typical.
Yeah.
And that's actually the hardship of people.
Yeah.
So now, and most of the time, people lose motivation in those 5 months. But I'm along, so I kept them motivated those 5 months. So finally we were in his appointment, and I'm there at CAMH with him. And the nurse said, okay, sir, I'm going to need you to wait here. It's a confidential conversation with him, and we're just going to be there. Like, yeah, sure, no problem. And then he said, wait, EJ's not coming? And she said, yeah, it's a confidential conversation. And then he said, but he knows everything.
Yeah.
So, and then she said again the same thing. And then finally he said, I'm not saying a thing to you unless he's in there.
Yeah.
So she capitulated. So here I am in the room now.
Yeah.
And then she asked, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I guess I'm his worker, different hats." She won't understand pastor. I said, "Okay, so what do you do?" So I said, "All of the above." And she didn't understand that because in social work, you specialize. You're doing housing, education, employment, counseling. And I told him, I do all those things for him. And he actually nodded and said, he's my guy.
Yeah.
Whatever, I trust him. And even if I don't know, I'll try to find someone who does know.
Yeah.
So.
You told me too about a few months ago we were talking, you were working in the jail on a project that you would refer to as your prison epistles. Is that still ongoing, or what? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I realized that a lot of commentary on the prison epistles are not really written by prisoners.
No, they're written by theologians.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so,
pastors.
So what a crazy idea to ask prisoners their insights on the prison epistles. Whoa.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. They picked which prison epistle they wanted to tackle. And then we were there. And man, they asked me questions that I never thought of. Had insights into the emotions of Paul while he's in prison that most people won't know. Right? I didn't know that usually when you get arrested, you're a little traumatized. And the last thing you want to do is write a letter. So that will take time. And usually your first letter is very emotional.
Yeah.
And when you read, we were reading through Philippians, and sure enough, Paul's letter was very emotional. And I never thought of that.
Yeah.
And I never even thought he must have labored before he even wrote this. I never, for some reason in my head, Paul gets arrested and starts writing the book.
Yeah. Yeah. Does somebody have a quill?
Yeah. I don't know why I thought that, but that was the image in my head.
Wow, that's.
Yeah, I didn't think about he must have had a crisis of faith, sitting in that prison cell, wondering Lord, what just happened?
Yeah. So are you documenting the sessions you've had in jail with guys talking through the epistles?
We have. We're actually. I have a new project that I'm going to work on. It's going to be a bit more unique. I'm actually just telling the guys today. I'm going to journey with them for them to write their own psalms.
Their own psalms. Wow.
Yeah. I'm going to have some prisoners write psalms.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, so first I need to teach them how the psalms work.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably going to help them read through the psalms themselves. And then eventually I'm going to ask them to write their own psalms, and hopefully I can audio record them reading their own psalm. And I think I can't imagine how powerful that would be if they can pass that on to other fellow prisoners. Right? Yeah, and because a lot of the psalms are sometimes an affirmation of someone's dark thoughts. They're not always happy.
No.
And I think we live in a world where sometimes darkness is not affirmed.
Right.
It's not thought of, but it's in the Bible. But a lot of people these days are running through dark thoughts. Depression is common.
Yeah.
So, I don't know where this is going to
It's interesting how we think that, a lot of people are suffering with anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
Unparalleled truth that's happening. Sometimes we forget, though, that that's timeless. And you start reading the Psalms and you realize, oh my goodness, this is just as dark and heavy as anything that anybody goes through.
Yeah. Whenever I feel bad about myself, I read Lamentations 3. And I go, okay, well, I'm not that angry.
Good. There's somebody worse off than me.
Yeah. The Message version even says, oh Lord, You have crushed my teeth in the gravel.
Oh, that's not good.
And I'm like, okay, I'm not. I don't think I'm that angry, but okay.
Yeah, yeah. Back in September 2019, you organized a great event, our City Toronto conference.
Yes.
And we had many urban practitioners that were giving workshops, sharing their stories. In fact, we were able to record several of those sessions and weaving those into our Sidewalk Skyline podcast. Is there going to be another Our City Toronto?
I'd like to think so.
Mm-hmm.
I probably just, one, I didn't realize how taxing that would be.
Mm-hmm.
And then right after that, I had the urban ministry tour, and man, I was tired.
Yeah.
But I think that idea behind it is so powerful, because it's not even about me glorifying myself.
Yeah.
It's about like, how can I create a space that is a celebration of ministry in the city, a celebration of one another, where it's not about, oh, I'm doing it better than you. It's more like, well, I'm doing this. Yeah. Can you learn from it, or can I learn from you? And just a safe space. And the city's so big. Mm-hmm. When Scripture says the harvest is plenty, laborers are few, it's definitely true. The laborers are few. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so for the few, wouldn't it be great to learn one another? And I think the biggest great qualitative outcome of that gathering was people from different ministry tribes, mm-hmm. different denominations, different disciplines, different practices. We're all in the same room.
Yeah.
And I think about Acts chapter 2, many tribes, many nations all worshiping God and in their own tongue.
Yeah.
And like, I guess that's my new interpretation of that. Right?
Yeah.
Different ministry tribes.
Yeah.
We're all different.
Yeah.
I think there might be just theological differences that we just might never reconcile.
But so much to learn from each other, and so much positive relationship and encouragement we can give to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And fits with the tone of the city. Toronto is the most diverse city in the world. Yeah. And people learn to coexist and maintain their differences.
Yeah, that's our tone with the podcast too. We don't want to just be a tribal podcast. We want to be a podcast that gives voice to urban ministry that is Christian, no matter what translation or tribal affiliation that comes through.
Yeah, because the reality is the city is not tribal. The tribal is we're here together. Yeah. You've
had a bit of a home church gathering, and I don't know what you're calling it yet, or if you've actually said it's a church or it's a potential church.
Yeah.
Tell us about what you're doing.
So our gathering happened by accident. A friend of mine, who was a former Toronto athlete, lost his leg. He had it amputated, and I was visiting him. And he used to be part of Church in the City when I was on staff there. And so I was visiting him. And then it was December. One day he said, EJ, it's Christmas time. Christmas time's coming up. What are we doing? And I said to him, well, I'm not a pastor anymore. I'm not doing anything. And he said, but it's Christmas. It's like, I know, but I'm not a pastor anymore. Like, I'm not doing anything. And then he was quite persistent. And eventually he said, but you know people that have nowhere to go.
He found your button.
Yeah. Like, I go home. I tell my wife, Cheryl. She starts weeping. It's like, we do know people that have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
So we had a Christmas service at our home. We had a Bay Street trader and his family. And he actually was, at that time, unsure of his faith. I think still to this day. Radio shows, his family, and my homeless friend. And that was our first service. And we were like, well, that felt good. Let's do that again. So we did it Easter.
Mm-hmm.
We had even more people.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, well, that felt good.
Mm-hmm.
And then that fall, we started meeting once a month. We have no website. There's nothing. We grow by relationship.
Mm-hmm.
People bringing other people or people I meet and led to faith. We have a lot of new believers in our midst.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been meeting once a month now, like 2 years come this fall. We're coming to the point now where every service I literally pray not everyone shows up because I don't know how we'll fit.
You don't know how you'll fit into the apartment.
Yeah. On big occasions, we rent the community center. Like
Mm-hmm.
Christmas, we had 23 people,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which I thought that's pretty good. Christmas Eve service.
Yeah.
Potluck, hey. For a church that doesn't technically exist.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. So we're just trying to discern our next steps as a community. I felt it was good to learn how to be a community first,
Mm-hmm.
and to be a church in the community to be a secondary thing.
Mm-hmm.
Most people do that reverse. Let's do a church in the community and then figure out how to be a community.
Mm-hmm.
That's not necessarily bad,
Mm-hmm.
but it just didn't feel right for us. Probably doesn't suit who I am anymore. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. In terms of name, I don't know. Someone may have accidentally named it.
Yeah.
Because I live in the second floor, so she said, "Oh, when's our next gathering at the upper room?"
Yeah.
I go,
That fits. Yeah.
okay.
Good thing you're not on the 13th floor. You know?
No. Yeah,
But the 13th floor.
But historically, our fellowship started at Hebden Mission, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
literally down the street from me.
Yeah, Queen Street.
I also live on Queen Street.
Yeah.
And I'm just a few blocks east of where we started. So
Yeah.
so I don't know. I mean, we'll see where it goes. We'll see where the Spirit leads.
Yeah.
We do sense that there is
Sounds risky.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, this whole thing is a risk. My gosh, I was just telling my wife the other day, like, why are we doing this?
Yeah. How do you support yourself?
Oh, well, that's another risky thing. Fundraise every dollar.
Yeah.
So either churches support me
Mm-hmm.
or believe in our work. Individuals support me and believe in our work and pray for us and affirm us. And that's actually very meaningful for us.
Mm-hmm.
We are right in the thick of things.
Yeah.
You know, the Danforth shooting is up the street from us.
Yeah.
I was actually telling some friends yesterday, you know, those kinds of incidents feel different for us
Mm-hmm.
because other people, that was a great news cycle for a week
Mm-hmm.
and then people moved on.
Yeah.
I can't move on.
No, it's affected where you live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because now I still go to those places, pass by
Yeah.
those spots, and then we remember.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and definitely we pray that we can be a healing agent in our
Yeah.
community, a catalyst for something good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You were one of the early round of Mission Canada workers, actually.
Yeah.
You know, and I think Trevor Gingrich at his what school is he at again?
Humber. He's on
Humber,
Humber. Yeah.
He was our first Mission Canada worker, and then a few more trickled in, including you.
Yeah.
And so if listeners are interested in being a part of supporting you, we'll put the donate link up in the show notes.
Yeah.
So you can.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So you can go to sidewalkskylinepodcast.com and we'll have a link there. How else can people get a hold of you? How can they find you online?
Well, I'm Googleable.
Okay.
Who would have thought that'd be a...
Golly, Google.
Yeah. Who would have thought that'd be a noun?
Yeah.
Or is that adverb? I don't know. Like, I'm Googleable. You put Ejay.
I think that's an action. So
It's a verb. It's a verb.
Yeah.
Googleable. Won't see that in the dictionary 15 years ago. and there's a bunch of vlogs out there. I've been slower at it these days. Parenthood has slowed me down. Well, it's not actually.
So if we went on YouTube and type in Ejay Tupe, you'll find your video vlogs.
Yeah. I've only slowed down on them recently, not because there's no content, but I've been walking more intimately with people, and now it's harder to navigate what is.
You're walking slower too because you have a baby.
Yeah, but like some of the stuff we're dealing with are super intimate.
Yeah.
And super tricky.
You can't rush by.
Yeah, and I can't put it out there. You know, it wasn't a flash. It's not like we made 100 sandwiches. We went to the park, handed them out. No. This is like I got a phone call at 2 a.m. in the morning. Like just, and as hard as those stories are that we juggle. And to be honest, they are hard sometimes. I feel so honored, also being in part of that part of someone's journey. Yeah. And now, it's almost like when Jesus talked about the Holy Spirit being a counselor, I didn't think that would become a very important distinction in my ministry season, especially because if you know me, I'm loud and I'm out there, but soothing counselor. Now I didn't see that coming. Yeah. God's funny, man.
He is. But and I think one of the ways that God has really strengthened you too is your wife Cheryl. Man, she's such a good compliment to you, and I know that you are to her. Yeah. So Ejay, we're running out of time here, but I just wanted to say thank you for being on the episode.
Thank you.
And it's always good to connect with you and get updated on what's happening, because there's always another story. Yeah. And so if anybody out there is looking for a guest speaker or looking for a Sunday fill, and you're willing to pay him.
Hey, I like preaching at your church.
Ejay, I got to tell you, Ejay, you are a knock it out of the park preacher, man. You know how to preach. And our folks in Windsor, every time you've been down, I always hear the accolades long after you're gone. Oh. And in fact, just last week, somebody was saying to me something about, we should have Ejay come speak again. They make a deep connection to what God is doing through you.
It's not just because of me. You built a great community there. A lot. There's a lot of synergy there.
Yeah, I guess I got to book you in again.
But thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, and just pray that in that high-risk ministry that God has called you, that you would be sheltered in His safe hands. Yeah. And thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you.
I hope that hearing Ejay's passion inspires you to consider how you can go and partner with the things that God is doing downtown in your city. You've heard us mention the Our City Toronto conference that happened last fall. While it's too soon to be planning a post-pandemic large gathering, it's not too soon to be planning some online urban ministry conferences and possibly some smaller gatherings. I'm part of Ejay's team looking at how we can do some Our City conferences online this fall. We'll be sure to let you know when something like that is happening. So subscribe to this podcast and keep listening. Our next episode on June 15th will feature a session with the last of this chapter's Gangland preachers. Mark Goring is the pastor of Regent Park Church in Toronto and was profoundly affected by gang activity in the Malvern area. Be sure to download that episode when it comes out. Also, check the show notes for our episodes at sidewalkskylinepodcast.com. You'll find additional material, photos, and links that expand on the content you get here. Ejay Tupe is a Mission Canada worker who raises his own support to do the things he does. And if he touched your heart today, there's a link on our website that will give you an opportunity to support his work financially. Well, that wraps up today's session. Until next time, keep one ear to the sky and one ear to the ground in your city. I'm Kevin Rogers, and you've been listening to the Sidewalk Skyline Podcast.